All right, Captains. In this week's Community Spotlight, we bring on Mighty Bob of the Tal Shiar's Most Wanted. And I've invited him onto the show because he's created a very valuable tool for the Star Trek Online community that you may not be aware that it exists. And that tool is a Google spreadsheet available to everyone, and it helps players figure out the costs of upgrading items in the game. Mighty Bob, thank you for coming on the show and giving us this brief introduction and walkthrough.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, I actually came across this in your forum signature. You had a link to it, and it's a very, very detailed spreadsheet. And for some people, a spreadsheet like this can be a little overwhelming. So, before we get into the how to use the spreadsheet, why don't you tell us a little bit about the genesis of this particular project and what inspired you to put it together?
Well, so first the upgrade system was announced, and then it went on to Tribble, of course. And it actually started out as a suggestion to a different user entirely. He's called the Belgrave, and he's a really prolific spreadsheet maker. And he's got one for research and development. And I actually asked, hey, so once we have this data out, would you add some cool stuff to your R&D spreadsheet? And I ended up making a simple little calculator to show as an example, and then I couldn't stop myself, and I just made this entire spreadsheet.
Awesome. Now, what talk to us a little bit about the research in putting together a spreadsheet like this. Where did you pull the numbers from? How did you verify them? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, more hours on Tribble than I would like to admit to, basically. Just jumped on Tribble and started upgrading things. Just count how much tech points every item needed, make a note of it, upgrade stuff, and then repeat ad nauseum. I've got a note on the spreadsheet that says any of the values that are bold and red in the tables are just extrapolations. So that means anything that's in normal black text is something that I actually directly did on the Tribble server. So all of that stuff is things that I directly upgraded myself just to check the tech point values.
Okay. So, all right, let's jump into the spreadsheet itself here for a second and maybe go from top to bottom here. When a Star Trek Online user goes into the spreadsheet, links, of course, to the spreadsheet will be in our show notes. Where do they start? Where do they even begin?
Well, if they just want to look at everything, all they have to do is load up the spreadsheet and take a look. If they want to actually use the little calculator at the top, they'll have to make a copy of the spreadsheet, and they can do that from the File menu right over here. And there's a Make a Copy option, and that requires them to have a Google account, or there's also download options from that same File menu. But in testing the download options, I've noticed that sometimes it doesn't properly save the formulas because you can get an offline version as an XLS or an open document format. But to actually, I guess decipher all of this, it's got a few basic sections, and then it just repeats for different types of gear. And the tables list from starting at a Mark 1 item how many tech points you need to get to Mark 2, and then starting at Mark 2 to get to Mark 3, and so on and so forth.
So why don't we start from the very tippity top here and talk about this section here. Let's say I go into the game. Actually, why don't we do that? Let me go into the game. All right, so let's say, all right, I've got this. Is this my Mark 12? Yeah, this is my Mark 12. All right, so I'm gonna bring us back in, kind of into that. All right, so Mighty Bob. So I have, for instance, a Mark 12 Fleet Anti-Proton Beam. Okay, when I right-click, of course, I go to Upgrade Item, and the new window pops up. So this one I have not invested any upgrade points or tech points to yet. So where would I go to calculate how much ultimately it's going to cost me to get not only to 13 but ultimately to 14 without even changing the rarity?
So when you slot something into the upgrade window, it'll tell you how many tech points you need to upgrade it to the next level. And we can see on this particular beam that it wants 72,000 tech points. So when you go to the sheet, all the tables tell you exactly what that's going to cost you. So if this counts as a normal weapon, so it's in this first table right here in the top left, and it's asking for 72,000 tech points, which lines up with what the game is telling you. So that's, what's that? So let's see, row 23. So it's F23. It's the ultra rare column, and it wants 72,000. You don't necessarily need to look at the column for that. That's just kind of a way of telling without looking at the particular item in the game. So you take that, and then you can plug it up into that green slot there, cell C2, and you just plug in 72,000 and hit enter, and it will calculate how many basic or improved or superior or experimental tech upgrades you'll need. And then it'll also calculate how much dilithium it'll cost to apply those, how much EC it would cost in order to craft it yourself, or if you're using the basics, how much it would cost to buy that from the vendor. And then just for fun, I also threw in how much Zen would that equate to at the current exchange rate. And if you look at the current exchange rate in the game, you can find that and plug that into J2, and it'll calculate that all out for you. It was.
Oh, so if I go back to the game and then I open up the lithium exchange.
So current rate is about 153. Yeah, 153, 154.
So then I would change. All right, so 154. Okay, so therefore, if I have superiors, it's going to cost me, one superior upgrade applies 12,800 tech points. So I need 6 of them in order to meet that 72,000 requirement. The dilithium cost is going to be a total of 6,450. And if I were to craft the items myself, if I were to craft a one superior upgrade, it would cost me 90,000 EC.
It's 90,000 for all 6 of the ones that you need, since they're 15,000 each.
So I'm not a crafter, right? So I would, if I asked my buddy Skiffy to craft this for me, I would essentially owe him 90,000.
Yeah, you'd owe him 90,000 energy credits and whatever materials are needed in order to craft it.
Okay. And now, if I wanted to, tell me why the Zen is important here.
It's not necessarily important. That was mostly just kind of a trivia column. Although it's sort of a way to gauge your costs in a method other than energy credits or dilithium.
So that 42, what it means is that 6,450 equates to 42 Zen?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. So what's going on? All right, so this essentially, these columns here from 12 to 24 are reference tables. This already is just plugging in the costs of tech points needed to go from one rank to another.
And so in the top right, we've got, obviously the sheet is brought to you by me, and I got a nice short URL to link back to it, and then I got a note here, which is a fairly important note, that any cell that has a little black triangle in the top right corner has a note in it that you can read by hovering your cursor over it. And then if you hover over it, this is what a note looks like, and bacon is in fact awesome. And so I've got a lot of these spread out through the whole spreadsheet. Some of them are just little notes, like, for example, in this particular column and cell, I tried this upgrade on this particular item. And then other ones, like that one right there, for example, I tested that on a Harping torpedo. And then other ones, like in the first column for stuff about rarity increases, that's explanatory text that will say, like, for example, the tech points to try a rarity increase when you're already at Mark 14 is this much, and if it fails, it'll roll over, and you can add this much again and again until finally your upgrade succeeds. I have a
So
tendency.
a lot of this from row 10 down is essentially what the game is already requiring. So a player, when they go into this, isn't really entering any data into any of these cells. Where they're really entering data, the interactive part of the spreadsheet is from this top section here.
Yeah. The only two cells that players will actually enter anything into are the two green ones at the top, C2 and J2.
Okay. And then essentially this is all for reference. Now, let's talk about that reference a little bit. So reputation space sets. These are essentially anything from the reputation system, including the new Delta. And it only starts at Mark, they only start at Mark 11. I believe that's in the task force, right? That's where there's the Mark 11.
Yeah.
So, in order to get from Mark 12 to Mark 13, it would cost It would cost 89,640 tech points.
That one is actually 11 to 12. And that's included because there are the legacy reputation items from Omega, back when you could still get a Mark 10 Mako Shield or an Omega Shield.
Oh, I see. So tech points to Mark 12 is 89. So tech points to Mark 13 would be almost 120,000. So if I want to find out then ultimately how many times I would do it, so I would put 119520 in this cell up here, C2, and essentially it would cost me 10 superiors, right? Then switch over because the note got in the way. So 10 superiors, a total of 10,750 dilithium, and a total of 150,000 EC, which is the cost to craft it, not including the actual materials to craft, or 70 Zen.
I suppose now would be a really good time to note that this entire table of references and the calculator up at the top they're kind of worst case scenario, because there's a nifty thing with the crafting system where every time you apply one of those tech upgrades, it has a chance to do a little mini crit, and it'll add 1.5 or 2 times the amount of tech points that it normally applies. So if a superior kit will apply 12,800, if it crits, it could apply 19,200, which will save you a bit of dilithium and a bit of energy credits, because then you won't need as many.
Right. So this is essentially worst case scenario. Or the calculation is essentially no modifier, no crits.
Yeah, exactly. Because those are kind of hard to calculate because they're all probabilities.
Right. And so that's what these. So what is that? What these modifiers are up here in row 9?
No, those modifiers are basically a way of comparing the different qualities to each other. So if we call a common Mark 1 item 1.0, then we can see that an uncommon Mark 1 item is 1.2 times the cost of a common one, and a rare is 1.4, and so on and so forth. And then we get some really weird modifiers when it comes to reputation gear and lobby store gear. Yeah, it's really interesting.
So essentially what you're saying is it is 2.656. It is 2.656 more costly to upgrade a rare versus a very rare.
No, all the way back to the common. So it is 2.656 times
I see.
more costly to upgrade a very rare reputation piece of gear than it is to upgrade a common regular piece of gear.
Okay. And now what about these more multipliers?
And then the more multipliers are vertical for the costs relative to each mark level. So, for example, if we go all the way down to 13 and 14, it costs you 2 times as much to upgrade from 13 to 14 as it does from 12 to 13.
Right, I see.
And that's not necessarily information that the player needs to know. It's just kind of cool trivia to have, but it might also fuel somebody else's spreadsheet. because there have been other spreadsheets that have been kind of spin-offs or that have used data from this sheet that I put together, and they're very helpful, and I wholly recommend them.
So as we scroll down, there's a whole new section here. So these are consoles. So up here, we're talking essentially about weapons, shields, engines, deflectors, warp and singularity cores. This includes fleet gear. Up here, we have the reputation sets, low BE, space, etc. And now down here, you have a separate section starting at 31, 32, that is just about consoles themselves.
Yeah, because consoles have different prices to upgrade than regular gear, as do ground stuff.
So now, just taking a quick moment here, looking at, because again, this section that we're looking at here from 34 to 46 is the consoles themselves. Talk to us again about what this repeats here at row 26, 27, and 28. What are these numbers here?
So starting with row 26, every item always has a chance, when you're increasing its mark level, to get a lucky crit, and its rarity will increase. So if you're upgrading a green item, then there's a chance that it'll turn blue when you upgrade it, and so on and so forth. Each of these rarities has its own kind of base level. So if you're working on a green item, there's a 20% chance that when you increase its mark level, it will become blue. And then this number gets reset every single time the mark level changes. And once you're finally at mark 14, then this is also the chance initially that it will, again, increase its rarity when you're trying to do rarity upgrades. But if that fails, it carries over, and this is also the amount that gets re-added. So if you have a 20% chance at mark 14 and it fails, it will add another 20%, then you'll have a 40% chance on your next upgrade. And consequently, that means eventually it has to get to 100%, which is where row number 27 comes in. If you have a 20% chance, that means by the 5th upgrade attempt at mark 14, you're guaranteed to have 100%. So 27 is the maximum number of times you can fail. So 4 times you could fail, theoretically, and then the 5th time you could succeed.
Okay.
And then row 28, if you do some really funky probability math, which is way over my head, and I would like to thank FR Toaster, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'd like to thank FR Toaster for helping me with the probabilities. This is just a statistical or mathematical average number of trials until it finally does crit at mark 14 when you're trying to increase the rarity.
Okay.
But of course, you can't have half of a success, so round as needed.
Right. And so as we progress down into the actual spreadsheet itself, again, we're now here in the console areas. Then you actually have it as well for the ground gear. And again, this is information that has been taken from the game. There's nothing that players need to input here necessarily. What it boils down to is this top section here is the tool that players can use, the calculator players can use to figure out what the average costs will be for your upgrade kit. So if I go back to the game, and for instance, let's see, I think I was halfway with one of them. I think it was this one. Yeah. Okay. So if I were to do the difference here, I could essentially plug that in, right? I could essentially plug the difference in.
Yeah.
How much remaining it's going to actually be.
The remaining on that one would be 131,700. And so you could plug that in, and it would tell you how many upgrades you need to apply the remainder.
All right, so I would need 11 more superiors. It'll cost me a total of 11,000 dilithium, 12,000 dilithium, and EC about 165,000 or 77 cents. So let's say for instance, let me go back and do, let's go back and do the ultra rare fleet mark 12, right? So I want to go from mark 12 to mark 14, right? So it's essentially 72 plus 144,000, right? 72,000 plus 144,000, correct?
Yep, that's exactly right.
All right, so if I do that, so that's, I'm going to do some side math here. 72,000 plus 144. All right, so that, to go from Mark 12 in a reputation gear, or I'm sorry, a fleet anti-proton beam array, the total cost of tech points is going to be 216,000. Okay, which essentially means it's going to cost 17 to go from Mark 12, not even caring about the rarity.
Yep.
But going from Mark 12 to Mark 14 is going to cost me 17 superior upgrades plus 18,275 dilithium. So, let's say my ship, right, which is the the Avenger, and that's got, what is that? 7, 1, 2, 5, 8. It's got 8. It's an 8 console. I'm sorry, an 8 weapon ship. I would take your spreadsheet and multiply each number by 8.
Exactly.
And that would give me the total cost of what it'll really be. So if I do, so 136 superior, right? Superior tech upgrades. It'll be 146,200 dilithium. And if I were to craft each one of them myself, it would be 255,000 times 8, which is 2 million, 20 million EC? 2 million EC? Change these just to make it a little easier for... Okay. Yep, 2 million EC.
Or you could multiply 216,000 times 8 and input that in cell C2.
I could do that too. That would make it a lot easier now, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Maybe I should put some instructions at the top of this. That would probably be actually helpful.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, because for a player like me, I don't play a lot, right? I don't spend hours each day in the game. So I kind of want to know, all right, what's the final cost going to be for all this stuff, right? In order to get all my weapons up to spec, what's it going to cost? So right now I'm seeing 136 superior upgrades to get 8 weapons from Mark 12 fleet to Mark 14 fleet, sticking at ultra rare, not even thinking about epic. So plus 146,200 dilithium. That's no chump change, right? So
yeah.
All right. So you said do that, right? So you said times 8. That's 943 Zen.
It's quite a bit of Zen.
That's quite a bit of Zen. Quite a bit of Zen. So, captains, if you're looking at, trying to get an idea of the cost of what it's going to be to upgrade your space ship, right? One spaceship, just the weapons alone are going to cost you about 1,000 Zen if you wanted it right now, right? And even then, you really still can't get it. Let's say I went into the Zen store right now and bought, 1,000 Zen, right? And converted that into dilithium. Or converted that into EC, right? It's still not really going to meet the requirements because A, I need a crafter that's got all the materials, which is going to up the EC expense, plus the EC that it costs, right? So the EC to dilithium is still there's still that difference, right? I need to earn EC somehow. So right now that 943 is only for the dilithium cost involved, but not including whatever you do to earn EC, whether or not it's to sell keys or whether or not it's to sell items or whatever the case may be, plus having to buy via the exchange of the materials.
And of course, this also doesn't take into account the chance that you might get a lucky upgrade and you'll probably get several little mini crits that will reduce the price when you're applying the tech points. But yeah, it can get pretty pricey. And I've got a tab down at the bottom called sample upgrade costs. It's underlined in pink right here. And this is a projection. I didn't actually do this, but this is an example of how much it would hypothetically cost to upgrade everything on one of my ships, which is Cardassian Galore or Galore. And right now I've got 4 spiral waves on it, 4 weapons from the Reputation store, Reputation deflector, engine, a fleet shield, fleet warp core, 5 fleet consoles, 4 Reputation consoles, 1 Lobby console, and the Plasmodic Leech is already gold, so it doesn't actually have any upgrade costs, but I put it on the list anyway.
Right.
And so I basically took all of the stuff from the main spreadsheet and calculated everything that it would cost me, and it's 4.2 million tech points just to get to Mark 14, which is what this leftmost section is, just getting everything to Mark 14, not even worrying about rarity. And then I also have getting everything up to ultra rare in the middle section. And then further on the right, I also added costs, estimated costs, for getting everything all the way up to epic quality. And it's a bit of a whopper. I'm talking almost 3 million dilithium. And I even used some fairly conservative number of rarity failures at Mark 14. And then down below that, I also threw in some samples of my own ground gear. I like to rock the Omega shield and the armor and the auto carbine because Omega is awesome. And I love the Dyson gun.
Right. So, it's not cheap.
Yeah, it can get pretty expensive. There's an infographic that popped up, I think it was like a day and a half ago, maybe 2 days ago. It was pretty, it's actually a bit less than this, but it still can be pretty expensive.
Right, this infographic essentially causes a significant amount of sticker shock, right? So, and this is something that yes, did pop up just a few days ago, probably the week of November 9th. And so this has been floating around on the subreddit from Loot Critter Files at WordPress. It's somebody that's essentially blogging about Star Trek Online, and so there is a significant amount of sticker shock here. You know, the sheer amount of Zen that it would cost to upgrade a tier 5, and then down here getting into tier 6 ships. But this infograph, you know, although informative, there's still what it does is that I think it sticker shocks the community, right? And so they don't see the nitty gritty and what it all means, right? And that's something that I really enjoy about your spreadsheet, is that this allows me to go in, already you have it referenced here at the bottom, right? I don't have to switch into the game and take a look. Okay, well, I mean, I could, right? I could go in and do the math there. But just fundamentally, go into your spreadsheet, type in the base cost, right? So if I'm doing my fleet weapons, you know, adding 2 numbers together, adding 72,000 and 144,000, then multiplying that times 8 up here with some, you know, just some quick Excel formula math. And then here everything is popped up. And it's still even more EC and more Zen cost than that, because again, like I mentioned earlier, it costs something to get the materials to craft the superior tech upgrades. And so if your go-to crafter doesn't have these, you either have to go and buy them on the exchange, which is going to cost more EC, or you got to try to hunt them down yourself, and that's that'll take you a little bit of time.
Yeah, it's going to cost you something. It could be time, it could be currency. This is mostly there just to tell you the cost of applying the tech upgrades, which is dilithium, and then if you're going to craft it yourself, how much will it cost just to craft it, but it doesn't take into account resources. There's a couple of other sheets that I keep plugging that are like really, really detailed in managing your resources. I got links to them down at the bottom.
Is this tab or in the links tab?
It's in the black box right there, rows 85
Okay.
to 92. The first link, Great Upgrade Calculator by, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Hadoho or Hadauhao. That one's pretty good. You can input prices of everything for the very rare and the rare materials on the exchange in the top section. And then there's columns for, do I want to use superior upgrades in column J, or do I want to use improved upgrades? And you can actually compare and contrast how much that will cost. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, there's also a section for inputting, oh, I already have this much rubidium, or I already have these many radiogenic particles, and it can tell you how much you can save. And then down at the bottom, it'll give you a great estimate for how much that will cost.
Okay.
And then there's another sheet by the Belgrave, that one right there that you're hovering over. And it has a lot of cool stuff in it after it loads. It's got upgrade requirements. It's got a list of those special R&D DOFs that you need to craft stuff at level 15, project requirements and costs, and it tracking your own levels. So if you go to the costs tab right there, you can input the current prices of everything on the exchange and make sure to keep that updated, because otherwise it'll give you inaccurate calculations. And then if you go to the the My Levels, you can also input, these are my levels, and this is how much stuff that I already have. And then it'll take all of these inputs from the Levels tab and the Costs tab, and if you go to the Upgrade Requirements tab right there, then you can select, I want to use superior upgrades, and this is the upgrade type that I'm using, and it has these columns that tell you how many are needed, or how many you lack. Like with the data that he's got here, he needs 15 plectin in order to craft these, but apparently he's already got 10 because the lack column says that he's only lacking 5 of them. And then it can tell you how much it'll cost to buy the materials, or how much to buy the pre-crafted components, or just to buy the upgrades themselves down at the very bottom. And there's a whole bunch of sheets like this throughout the community, and if you hit the links tab at the bottom here, or on my own sheet, there's links to all these other cool spreadsheets. You guys at Priority 1 could probably do an entire series of episodes just on all these cool resources that we're all kind of just putting out there for the community. It's just, you know, the great irony is that I kind of hate doing math, and yet here I am buried in spreadsheet land doing math.
Right,
just kind of for my own amusement, which is weird.
Yeah. No, but it certainly helps the community, and I think that whether or not you're a casual player trying to improve your skills, or just wrapping your head around the upgrade tab, or just trying to wrap your head around the upgrade system, these tools make it very easy for you to figure out, all right, what is the end cost going to be in terms of upgrading an entire ship to Mark 14. It's either going to be very expensive, and just one ship, right? And some people, and this is probably the biggest concern that the community has, is that upgrading just one ship can cost you well over 1,000 Zen, right? If you were just doing ships at maybe 2,000 Zen, and this is where for instance, this infograph, it confuses me a little bit, because where is this 15,480 Zen coming from for a tier 6 ship? Is that per ship for the 4 ships that are involved? Like, what if I want to upgrade my Avenger, which is a tier 5 upgrade? How much Zen is that ultimately going to cost me?
There's actually a forum thread for this particular infographic, and I suppose the link will probably be put up with the podcast. And I actually asked them a couple questions about the infographic. Some of it was a bit confusing, and any dilithium and Zen figures that they're citing are from grinding dilithium to buy the packs mostly. Like, it's definitely not going to cost you 15,000 Zen to upgrade a single ship. It could get up there depending on how many ships you're upgrading and across how many characters. I mean, you're looking at possibly the price of 1 or more lifetime subs if you're really, really going for gold on a whole bunch of gear.
Right. Well, Mighty Bob, is there anything that we didn't cover from this Excel spreadsheet that you wanted to highlight or spotlight and make the community aware of?
I guess the links tab down at the bottom is mostly it. There was the links from the other spreadsheet, but I'm just kind of trying to get all of this stuff together in one central location just to be as helpful as possible, because there's a lot of community resources out there and a whole lot of players probably don't know about most of these, and it's just great to have this kind of information at your fingertips.
Absolutely. Well, Mighty Bob, I want to thank you for spending some time with us here on Priority One Podcast to introduce the community to these types of tools and then how to use them as well. Because again, when you first open up the spreadsheet and it goes right to this, it can be a little daunting for those of us that aren't as comfortable with Excel. But after having this introduction, I think players will be able to start looking at it and start using them to their advantage to figure out how best to play Star Trek Online and how to get the biggest bang for their buck.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And if anybody has questions about this, my handle is right there on the sheet. That's why it's there. And keep your eyes peeled, because there's other cool things that are being worked on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mighty Bob. It's a pleasure having you.